It's Linda Lejeski. I am the National Employer Representative for the BeOnAir Network of Media Schools, which includes Ohio Media School, Illinois Media School, Colorado Media School, and Miami Media School. This series is now starting its third year. It's brought to you by Career Services of the BeOnAir Network. It's really our goal to bring our students, our alumni, and our connected network together with industry experts so that you can level up and grow what it is that you're doing and really find that place that makes you successful, whether you're just starting out or you're already on your journey. If you're here live, you'll notice that your microphones are muted and your cameras are off, but during the hour session, there'll be some time for Q&A, and at that time, we'll open up your microphone, or if you prefer, there is a chat option up at the top of the screen, and you're welcome to put your questions in there. We've got a very well-planned segment ahead of us, so be patient as we move through the different segments because we are going to allow you opportunities to get involved. If you're watching us on YouTube, we're really happy that you're with us here as well. We ask you that you like and subscribe to our BeOnAir channel on YouTube, and we will put those links in the chat as we move along. So why are we here? We're here tonight to welcome the marketing team of ESPN Good Karma Brands. They have been great friends to us in Cleveland as well as across our campuses as we have leveled up our students to interns, interns to graduates, graduates to hire, and lots of opportunity because they do such a nice job in not only mentoring, but also in bringing on board interns that have, been able to grow within their program and reach that place that they become a great team member as well. We've shared a rich history in Cleveland, and we're very, very proud of our alumni who have been with ESPN Good Karma Brands for quite some time now. And you're going to be introduced to one of the members of this group here tonight, who is an alumni of Ohio Media School. So, who are our experts tonight? We've brought you the marketing team from ESPN Good Karma. The goal is really that they're very engaged with their interns and they do a great job in preparing them for their hiring, and they know what they're looking for. They get many, many resumes across their desk and interested folks who would like to come on board for them. They're an organization who really looks to offer opportunities to all types of different people, different backgrounds, whether it's sports or marketing. And we thought they'd be a great team to bring to the table to answer those questions about resumes and cover letters, to talk about reels, and most importantly, to talk about the interview process and how you can land yourself at the top of the heap, which is what we're all looking to do, getting your foot into the door for the interview. Our guests tonight are really, we're so happy to have you here on a beautiful day in Cleveland. They've chosen to give that evening to us. And our guests are Brian Vamos. Brian, am I saying your last name correctly?
Yes, it's close.
Close.
It's all good.
Okay, I really should have cleared that up. But Brian is the director of marketing. We have Kirsten Lewis, who has been to our campus several times, and Kirsten is a marketing facilitator. She really takes on a variety of roles as they come to her through the marketing department, and we're so excited to have her here. Kevan Arnold is a graduate of Ohio Media School. He went through our sports broadcasting program. He was an intern himself, very dug in and really had a passion for sports, had another career, was able to do a pivot, come on board in a part-time capacity, and grow himself into a full-time member of the marketing team, producer. And we're just so very, very proud of all that you have accomplished and really appreciate your friendship that you continue to give to Ohio Media School. And then we have Kelly Balmert, who is the internship coordinator. She's also executive administrative assistant. How did I do there? Something like that. Okay, you're on mute, but I think I kind of nailed it. I'm sorry about that. We're happy to have you here to round out the team. They're always available to us, and I know that they're going to share great information with you as we roll through the hour. A little bit of housekeeping for everybody. Again, the mics are muted. We've got a very full presentation, so as we're moving through, Please be sure if you have a question to write it down or put it in the chat. When you're called on, let's keep it nice and concise so that we give others a chance to ask questions as well. And we'll get to as many questions as possible. And I know this hour is just going to go like that. So without further ado, I'm going to offer this roundtable over to you, Kirsten, and maybe you want to give a quick hello, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen really quick as we kick off. Selecting it now. And then just let me know when it closes up, because sometimes it takes a minute.
Yeah, no worries.
Learned.
I know you might just see me as you share your screen.
It's going.
Yep, no
Loading
worries.
up into the. Oh.
Perfect.
All right. And we should be good.
Perfect.
So we'll start by introducing ourselves and kind of giving some background information, and then jump right into it. So Brian, if you want to start.
Yeah, of course. Conveniently timing. I took a drink of water as I started this and choked on it. So great start here. So excuse me if I cough. Brian Vamus, Director of Marketing with Good Karma Brands. As we alluded to, all of us are on the team at ESPN Cleveland. So a historical destination for sports talk in Cleveland. You may be familiar with some on-air personalities, such as one that you'll see on this call, Kevan Arnold, but also some other OMS grads, such as Emmett Golden, Tony Rizzo, Tony Grossi. So really honored to be a part of this team at ESPN Cleveland. But even from a Good Karma brand standpoint, we're a sports marketing company whose bread and butter is sports radio. That's why this is such a cool group of individuals to talk to from our standpoint. Just a quick background. My background is not in traditional media. It is more so in collegiate sports marketing. So went to a few different universities throughout my career. Actually went to school at Bowling Green State University, about 2 hours from Cleveland. Excuse me. And worked at the University of Notre Dame, then the Air Force Academy, and then the University of Louisville for about 4 years before I switched things up and decided to join the media world. So that's where I'm at today. Kirsten, you are up.
Yep. And so my name's Kirsten Lewis. I am the marketing facilitator. My background was not initially in marketing. I went to the University of Oklahoma. I did public relations and communications with the athletic department while I was there. Got to kind of work with media, got to work with different writers and learn kind of that side of media. And then I had moved to Cleveland in like 2021, started off part-time as a marketing event supervisor, kind of figuring out what I liked, and then really learned that I was good at marketing and could grow there. So became the marketing facilitator and have taken on various roles and just continue to learn different areas within the industry. And it's pretty fun. So Kevan.
Yep. And I am Kevan Arnold. I am an alumni of Ohio Media School. I actually originally went to Cleveland State University for my teaching degree and was doing a lot of substitute teaching, looking for a job, things like that. And I listened to 850 for a long time. ESPN Cleveland. My grandfather used to listen to the station before it was even branded ESPN Cleveland. And that's where my sports talk history goes from, as being just a fan and a listener. And I would always hear Emmett Golden do the live reads, the commercials for Ohio Media School, and it was something that was always in the back of my mind, and I decided to pursue it. So I went to Ohio Media School, went through the Sports Emphasis program, and got my diploma with that. Got an internship out of that with ESPN Cleveland in 2018. Worked my way through freelance work after that up until 2021, when I joined Kirsten as a marketing event supervisor at the same time during that football season, as things started to open up a little bit after COVID, and worked my way through the marketing department, was the marketing facilitator. Kirsten has now taken that on and taken that to newer and newer heights, as I have desires to be in the content team, And I've started transition to that by being the production director. I'm in charge of putting all of our commercials together based on partner requests, whether they have pre-recorded stuff or we need to record them ourselves, and all of those types of things, and also station promos and making those as fun and engaging as possible for our fans. And I'm also a producer there where when people are out for running shows, running the board for the shows, I'm one of the people that they call to fill in as a substitute. So kind of full circle in my career, went from substitute teaching to substitute board hopping, and still many more steps to go. Kelly?
Yeah. Kelly Balmert, internship coordinator at ESPN Cleveland, Good Karma Brands, and executive assistant, transitioning titles to office administrator at the moment. Another non-traditional route to ending up at ESPN Cleveland. I studied special education at Ohio State University, immediately took off and spent a couple years in the Peace Corps in the agriculture program, spent 2 years in Ecuador, came back, pursued some vet medicine, dabbled in that, did some teaching, and then ultimately found myself looking for some sort of administrative role and got lucky with ESPN Cleveland, Good Karma Brands, and really has opened a lot of doors. Built off of some nonprofit marketing experience that I had gotten earlier in my career, and really building on that now as part of the marketing team. But kind of a true testament to getting the right foot in the door, getting the right access to a company, and presenting yourself in a certain way is really valuable and can open doors that you didn't even realize you could get through. As the internship coordinator, I just wanted to kind of give everybody an idea of what it is that we offer, what we are looking for in candidates. Our internship is a semester long, so we do a spring, summer, and a fall internship, and we really want to provide our interns with full scope of what we do at ESPN Cleveland. So from sales to marketing to content, it's a all-inclusive type of internship. We don't separate our interns into different categories, while we do offer some ability to focus their intentions. If there's something that they want to focus on, there's the opportunity to do that. But we really find value in sharing the experience that goes through the whole office, where you get to understand from start to finish how campaigns are built and created and executed. So we have adapted our application process. We are now using a hiring platform for all of our applications to go through. So the first step would be to get that link. From there, you upload your resume and cover letter. Then we've also started using a new system, which is a one-way interview. So candidates that are selected from that point then get to do what's called a one-way interview. And it's a really uncomfortable thing to do, and it really puts people out of their comfort zone, but it is essentially just questions get prompted to you, and it's a recorded video recording of your responses. We started using that last semester, and I think it really gives people an opportunity to express themselves and show a side of them that is harder to express in black and white on a resume. From there, candidates are selected to participate in a panel interview in person or virtually with a group of our teammates. So that's a little bit about our internship and our process. And I think we're going to go through some resumes next.
Yep. So kind of when doing resumes, I think the thing to point out most of, like first, is that everyone has different preferences. So even putting together a list of like what to do, what not to do, like we all have different opinions, and there's not one singular correct way to do it. It's really expressing yourself. So things to include, it's anything that's relevant to branding yourself, and it can be non-related experiences. I think something that is always kind of confusing is like, oh, you want the most relevant, and you do want the most relevant, but in a way, almost everything can be presented in ways that show how you've grown from them and how they can relate to who you are as a professional. Customer service is always the one I think of as like, if you're working with people, that's a huge skill, and it's not really sold all the time of like, well, yeah, I did that, but it's not relating. So I think just really make sure that you put the skills that you can relate to the most and that can be told how it relates to the job. For formatting, show that you put effort into it, try to use the space efficiently, and really just make sure it's clean. The easier it is to read, and if you look at it quickly and it looks good to you, you're able to read it clearly, that's a good sign. When you're listing your experience, you can make sure that is chronological. So my preference, and we kind of talked about this, was like recent to oldest, which is kind of backwards because it's not like you would think oldest to recent would be chronological, but you want the most relevant current experiences. And you can separate your resume out to be where you put your relevant experience first and then have other experience lower. With volunteering, I think it's a really cool way to add to your resume. If you don't necessarily have a ton of experience or you're really passionate about something, it's a good way to just show a different part of what you've learned and what you can do. And it's a good way to fill up your resume if you don't have a ton of experience. And a really good way to strengthen your resume is to be vulnerable, get feedback from others, and really just have it represent you. Who are you? And with every job, we just want to know, what candidate are we getting? And you want to be part of a company that wants you for you. So as kind of hard as it is to be vulnerable, it is one of the most important things when it comes to strengthening your resume. What not to do, again, these are all preference of like not including photos. With colors, making sure that they're tasteful and not like in your face, super all over the place, and like a cohesive adding to it. And not selling yourself short goes back to like relevant experience of, everything you do is part of you. So really putting that into your resume can help a lot. So that kind of leads into like awards. Does it add to your resume? If so, add it. If not, it's up to you. Doesn't really hurt. Doesn't necessarily add either. And that's along the lines of purpose statements, skills, and GPA. Sometimes they take up space that you could use for other things that are more relevant. And so it's not necessary to have them, but it is a good way to also, if you need to fill up space and really need to have something that you can't really express in other areas of your resume, they are tools to kind of add to your resume. So, yeah. Then is there any other questions to answer with the resumes, or did we want to go through the cover letters and examples?
I'm sorry. Let's go to the next category, and why don't you talk through that, and then we'll open things up if anybody has a question as it relates to both.
Okay, so Brian will take over for cover letter and general tips.
Awesome. So I think Kirsten hit on a lot of really good things. And the one thing I really wanted to emphasize with all these things, and Kirsten led with it, is there's no one size fits all to any of this stuff. These are all of our preferences combined into one document, but use your best judgment, right? So those are some of the things we're going to go through here with these general tips. But first off, cover letters. Kirsten will laugh because she knows I'm not the biggest fan of a cover letter, but I do think it can weed out folks who maybe aren't taking the position as seriously as you would like if you're looking to hire them full-time, part-time for an internship. So you'll see a note on there, be professional and show personality. Like, let the cover letter serve a purpose. Let it be valuable. Because to me, if I'm scanning through hundreds of resumes, the ones that stick out are the ones that are going to draw my attention, good or bad. So being professional, showing personality, those are two really crucial things that stick out to me with cover letters. Backtracking a little bit, checking the job requirements and customizing it to fit from there is also really important to me. Shows you put the effort in, and vice versa. Also pay attention if you do customize it for one position and you're applying for something very similar, make sure you're updating. I'm applying for ESPN Cleveland, for instance, but I also just applied for ESPN Milwaukee. Make sure you update that. And you're not saying, I would like to have this position at ESPN Milwaukee, and you're sending that application to ESPN Cleveland. So it's easy to get tripped up. I think we've all been in the position where you're applying for dozens, if not tens of dozens of jobs at the same time. So just be careful, but customize it where you can, because it can really add to an application. That's what I mentioned. Again, I'm not somebody who 9 times out of 10 is going to read a full cover letter until I get to that next step. So to me, the resume is kind of the front door, but a cover letter can really add if it showcases something special. So just keep that in mind. And I think one of those ways you can showcase your abilities is your writing ability. I'm a grammar nerd, admittedly, and I think having good grammar, using this as a way to showcase your writing ability can really set you forward and above some others. So look at it that way. And again, just going back to being grammatically correct and accurate with the information. The last bullet there, I think go beyond just using the body of an email as your cover letter. So never a bad idea to include one. Say there's an application process that they just ask you to email their resume. I don't think it's a bad idea to also email your cover letter. But the point here is keep it separate from the body of the email. Just another step that goes above and beyond. Some general tips here with both resume and cover letters. Saving as a PDF is always a good practice. I'm not saying a Word document is going to disqualify you from any application necessarily, but say you're using a font besides Times New Roman or Calibri or something relatively basic, those fonts may not always come through. If somebody doesn't have a certain font downloaded on their computer and you send a Word document, I may see that it's something totally different than what you intended. So converting to a PDF kind of helps prevent that and keeps that end product from being seen the way you want it to be. Labeling with your first and last name before the resume and cover letter, also super important. Again, is it a total disqualifier if you don't do that? Not necessarily, but it looks professional. It brands yourself more than anything. Makes you easy to find on a computer. If I'm downloading 100 different resumes and I want to go back, oh yeah, Kirsten Lewis, I remember that name. I can easily look it up if you label it correctly. I mentioned this, I'm kind of a grammar nerd, so these next two are really important to me, but making sure everything is grammatically correct, making sure everything's spelled correctly. If you need help on that, Kirsten mentioned being vulnerable. I think this is where it really is important to lean on people, peers, people in career services, people at your school, parents. I've had my mom read my resume multiple times. Don't be embarrassed. People are here to help. That's how you catch a typo here or there. Read it over multiple times and you still might miss something, right? I think with the job I have now, I had a typo that I didn't even catch until after the fact, and I was just kicking myself. I couldn't believe that I didn't catch it. Lucky enough to still get the job, but you're not always that lucky, right? So keep that in mind. And then the last piece there, just double check the application instructions. I think the quickest way to get knocked out of the process is to not follow it properly. That could be as simple as what I said earlier. If the process is just to email your resume to somebody and for whatever reason you email asking how to apply, that shows me that maybe you haven't paid as close attention to the details as you should have. So those are kind of just some good rules of thumb. And I think from there, we would love to open it up to questions specifically on resumes and cover letters.
Wonderful. Do we have a hand raised? I think I see that. Dustin is our Career Service Director out of Illinois, Regional Career Service Director. Dustin, you have the floor. You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
So my question would just be this, because especially with AI becoming such a big thing, I know a lot of companies, there have been just some understanding that AI is now reviewing resumes or even application tracking systems. I was just kind of curious your guys' thoughts. Do you guys use those types of systems, or are you taking that 20 to 30 seconds to review resumes?
I can answer. So we don't use it. I know a lot of companies do, but really, I think it just depends on the company, type of company you're applying for. For bigger companies, it definitely is probably reviewed. If you think about hundreds of applications for bigger companies, they need help. On smaller companies and more like localized, we're definitely flipping through every single resume. So, you know, if you think about, say you have 60 applicants, that's 60 pieces of paper to look at. Sometimes it's glancing and then going back and reading. So that's kind of where layout really helps, of like, if it's easy to read, it makes our jobs easier. If we're having to kind of look and like digest a lot of different things about a resume, it takes a little more time. So I think it's just really knowing what company you're applying for and where to kind of direct like energies towards.
Great. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you, Dustin. Are there any other questions in the group? Not sure that I'm seeing a hand raise. You know what? This makes me think about font and font size. When you get a resume, is there something that's more attractive to your eye, or size of font that makes you feel more comfortable as you settle into a resume?
I can jump in here. I think for me, and it's funny, we had this discussion today, kind of just reviewing preferences. It truly is a preference thing. I think Kirsten had mentioned something about certain colors she didn't necessarily like on a resume, and I was like, oh, I actually really liked that resume because of that color use. So again, not a one size fits all for me. I generally would lean towards something that fills the space appropriately and doesn't overdo it. So if I can see that you made the effort to fill the space with your header, which should always be your name, and then maybe some contact information underneath, and some smaller fonts, I would lead with your name being the heaviest font, in my opinion, but the rest kind of being a generally formatted, well-structured size. I wouldn't, again, pick one or the over the other than being consistent. That would just be my one piece of advice. Be consistent with the fonts you use. If you're a design major or kind of familiar with that world, you'll hear don't use more than 2 fonts in one creative piece at a time. So that's another good piece of advice that I was given early on in my career. But again, it's all preference. Like I said, I think just being consistent is key.
Good. As a follow-up question, how do you feel about seeing the skills stacked on top? I don't know that we've covered that. Do you like to get a glance of skills and then bullet points below, or does it really not matter to you?
That's another preference thing. I'm not the biggest fan of skills sections just because it's usually pretty generic of like word and stuff. I think there are some really cool things that I've seen pulled out in the skills sections. So I don't think it really matters. It's just kind of, again, using that space. So I think it's just pulling out those skills, like especially for softwares and like things you've worked with, is a very kind of cool way to use it. I like seeing like words typed per minute was a really interesting thing I've seen in the skills section. And just that type of stuff could be useful.
Good.
Yeah,
a little bit out of the ordinary. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to echo Kirsten, like the technical skills, especially with this field. I'm sure Kevin can speak on Adobe Creative Cloud and like Adobe Premiere, and utilization of something like that could be really valuable to have that experience in advance of coming into a production role. Whereas my world, the Adobe Premiere may not be as relevant, but Adobe Photoshop may, versus like what Kirsten was saying, if it's a very generic maybe expectation at this point, such as a Microsoft Word, or something very generic, such as customer service. Those are traits, I think, at least from a base entry level, we kind of at least hope or expect that you already have those things. So if they're not a given, would love to see that. But if they do feel like a bit of a given, I would lean towards leaving them off.
Well, that's great information, because I think, we want to make such good use of a one sheet, right? So making those good choices as to what's expected versus what might be new and interesting for yourself. I think that's great advice. We have a couple questions, then we'll hop into the next category. Kyrie, are you there? You want to turn your mic on?
Linda, I don't think they have access. Hold on. Did you call on Kyrie?
I did.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute right now. Go ahead.
Hi, my name
Hi,
is
Kyrie.
I have two questions. So, one of my questions is an objective on a resume important? And what are keywords that would make your resume outshine?
I can take this one. This is something we had talked about earlier. For me, an objective is not as valuable as a professional summary. I think I don't need a statement that says you're applying for this role. And I think at that point, I know what you're applying for, but maybe a professional summary would be worthwhile. Again, I think that's something also for me that is only to be included if you have space for it. I think that's one of the first things that I'd rather see your experiences and your relevant coursework or things that you will bring to the table before an objective statement or some other piece at the top. A professional summary can be really useful, I think, if you've got a brief story to tell about how you will fit into our program. But I am not a fan personally of objective statements. I am pursuing a position as an internship as an intern. It's too formal for me and takes up valuable space. As far as keywords that stand out, not independent words. It's more how they fit into the overall goal of our pursuit. Is a lot of words can get really repetitive, I guess I would say, once you start flipping through a lot of resumes. But I think as long as you've organized things to highlight the relevance and the applicability of each experience, there's no key words that I would use as like magic words. They all start to look very similar.
If I could just quickly add to that, what Kelly was saying with the keywords, I don't think it's necessarily keywords. I think there's times where key experience can help. I was always told after my internship to put ESPN Cleveland, that internship, towards the top, because the 4 letters of ESPN are highly recognizable by a lot of people. And as people are taking that initial glance, as Kirsten talked about earlier, that's something that's going to stand out and one that they're probably going to want to go back to. Does it mean that I'm going to get that next interview? No, there's no guarantees with that, but some of that key experience can always help. But I don't think that necessarily keywords are there. I think it's what Brian, Kirsten, Kelly have all talked about. It's the organization and feeling like after you put your resume and cover letter together, you feel like you have represented yourself to your best ability at that point. And, hopefully you're selected to move on to the next step or whatever interview process that you're in.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're going to move to the next question if we keep it brief, because we've got a lot more to cover. Antonio, you are up.
Hello. My question is, if I have no corporate experience, how can I show that I'm fit for the job? And it's another question. Is it possible for me to request an interview from the employer?
I can get us jump started. I think this goes back just to your first question. It goes back to kind of what Kirsten was saying earlier, like volunteer experiences are crucial. I think especially early on. I'm trying to think back to when I first got started That's all I had was volunteer experience and something that was totally relevant. Like I'm thinking back to my job at Carter Lumber, where I was a general laborer and I was trying to apply for a ticket sales job with Bowling Green Athletics. Like had nothing to do with, in my head, had nothing to do with what I was applying for. As I dug a little bit further deeper into it, started to think about, okay, what are the traits that this employer is looking for in this specific role? I think that's a really good starting point. For me, that specific role, I knew it was customer service facing. Okay, let me think back to some of my volunteer experiences as a cashier at my local high school during athletic events. Remembered that, found those key objectives, those keywords that we were just talking about a little bit ago that I knew would stick out for this role, and started to craft my job description or previous volunteer description that way. Went back again, started thinking about, okay, what else am I going to be doing there? Money management. I'm going to be handling ticket sales, right? Remembered as a general laborer at my summer job in high school, I was handling money at that position. Okay, that was also relevant. So while these things may not seem to pop off at you, right? These corporate experiences that you may not have, everybody, when they say that, is underselling themselves. Like, I know you have more experience in there than you think. So that's really the key, is to pull out those traits that you learn from those experiences that may not feel very corporate just by name, but those skills and those traits that you're building from those experiences are super relevant to what you're going into. Again, I know it's not a one size fits all, and sometimes you will have to, start from the beginning and kind of work your way there. But volunteer experiences kind of do that. That second piece, sorry, I'm kind of being long-winded here. I don't think it's inappropriate necessarily to ask for an informational interview with an employer. If it's for a specific role that you're interested in, it depends how you go about it. I think you can request to learn a little bit more about the specific position. Mention that you applied if you did. That's totally fine. But I would probably draw the line at asking for an interview specifically for that specific role. But an informational interview, ask away. I think that's totally fair game and totally appropriate. I don't know if anybody else has anything. Go ahead.
Well, just real quick, because I know you guys are going to touch on, Kirsten, Brian, you guys are going to touch on this towards the end, so I don't want to take too much time with it. But Antonio, you talked about, what if you don't really have the experience? Well, just remember, everybody, each person that has gotten into their desired career or the job that they're really looking for, or at least an entry level spot of where they're trying to grow their career, everyone has started somewhere and they've gotten their foot in the door, and they didn't necessarily have all the experience that they have now. Like one of our hosts, Tony Rizzo, his resume would probably span a bunch of pages because he's done so many things, but he had to enter the business with very little experience somehow, some way. So whether it's this, whether it's teaching, something like that, take a look, make sure you're researching the company that you're applying for and know enough information. See what their team is like. We call ourselves teammates. Know what the team is like and how would you best fit with it, with your work ethic, with all of the other things that you've already done in your life. How would you best fit with that? And try to represent that in your cover letter and resume. I think that's the biggest thing. It's a question I always had starting out. Then I realized, like, I'm going to get experience somehow, some way. I just have to show that I am capable of this and get someone to believe in me like I believe in myself. Let my foot go in the door. I'm bringing the other foot with me, and you're going to have to drag both feet back out if you're once I have found that job. And that's kind of the mentality that you got to have.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Kev. That's so inspirational, right? Go in with one foot, but take both feet with you, and that's how you win. I think if it's all right, we're going to move to the next section of the reel, because we're going to do the reel and the interview also, and some resume examples. So hold tight to your questions. Let's give it back to Kirsten and let you take it away on the next section.
And I'm going to start with some resume and cover letter examples, just kind of what we've been talking about. These are all ones that I've had, got permission to use all of them. So it was a lot. I kind of highlighted some sections. So it's interesting because this is the same candidate. They sent me their updated resume after the internship, but I loved how in their initial one, how they broke out different roles within a job. I think, you know, when you're trying to really expand on your experience by breaking it out into more areas and showing different areas, it can help. And, you know, once he got experience, he added and he described and pulled out what was relevant to what he wants to do, which is really cool. And I made a note with an arrow of, he mentioned that he volunteered for the NFL like fan area, which was just something really cool. And he explained what he did. It adds a little. And I also pointed out the pre-law, sorry, zooming in because it's a little hard to see, but the pre-law society at Syracuse University. It's very random, doesn't really fit with broadcasting at all, but it's an interesting, like, it sticks out because you're like, huh, that's kind of interesting. It's a different area. And in general, like, in all of his experience, he has a lot of different things he did, and he definitely wants to be on TV broadcasting, but he's shown that he can do it all and is very interested in everything. So that's like a first example. And then this is another example of a resume. This candidate also sent me their updated resume from after the internship. And something that stood out was like her involvement with her sorority. It was really unique. She loves writing. She was a big writer, but she's just very big into media and wanted to gain experience. And once she went through the internship, she kind of shifted her resume and added more details on like everything she's done. And I'm going to actually go to her cover letter because it was I love reading cover letters. Brian's the opposite of me. I remember we had conversations about this, but something I wanted to like highlight in her thing was she talked about what she did and like her writing, because she's very passionate about her journalism. And I think what I really liked is that she just said, at the sentence here of, I believe that my time and experience in many departments has qualified me for a position like this one. I want to continue to develop my reporting and producing skills, and I believe that this is a chance for me to do so. When applying for the internship, it's really cool to just understand like why this internship and like what your goal is to get out of it. It's just kind of a cool thing. And I pointed out that spelling the person's name right, if you have access to their name, you can put hiring manager, but I have gotten cover letters before where my name is spelled wrong, and it's not really the best first impression, especially because it's in my email and I was getting these emailed to me. So I wanted to just point that out. And she sent me an updated cover letter. She takes a very similar structure now, just adding new experience. So I just wanted to show like you can still use just a basic template and adjust it. Going with the color, this pink resume here. I loved how she really had like some experience that was really relevant, but her volunteer experience, I liked how she made it bigger to explain different things she did that was like more relevant than her necessary, like her job experience. And so it's another way to draw out volunteer experience. And something that was super interesting that was not related to anything to do with this position was the tour guide. You have to be a pretty outgoing person to give tours of college campuses. So he pointed that that was like one thing when going through the resume. It was like, oh yeah, like it's random, but it does relate. And in the cover letter was, you know, sometimes it's okay to just be like, I'm applying for this. And, you know, when you have a statement of I'm applying for this role here, it shows that you're updating it and putting effort into it, and it makes it a little more personal for each job without going into super detail for each job. The easy template to carry across. And then a few more I have. So this was actually an OMS student, and I pointed out in the skills section that ability to type 55 words per minute. Is that relevant to anything to do with the internship? not necessarily, is it a really cool thing to have? Yeah. I think it's just kind of, it's cool to even know what your words per minute is, but to also point it out and, you know, be kind of proud of it is another thing and that's something that with your resume, like you can put stuff you're proud of too, with no shame. And then just like activities, things that you're passionate about. The podcast, you know, a lot of students, especially at OMS, have podcasts. So it's really cool to see like the passion for these podcasts and like, you know, what you're interested in. And this was one of my favorite sections I've gotten in a cover letter of just talking about, you know, I'm just going to read it because I loved it. I thought it, like, when I read it, I was super like inspired by it. You know, so I understand Cleveland is a big market that will need different mindsets to keep people involved and interested in what sport teams have to show. And I know with the constant evolution and change, I can be the key piece. I want to be honored to join a team for a fresh approach and a chance to prove myself and make a difference in the company. I think that was just really inspiring of like, you know, wanting to be a part of a community and really, I just loved it. I was super excited reading that. Like, I was like, oh yeah, this is somebody who's going to do a lot. This is another resume example, lots of experience. And I just wanted to show it's another Ohio media school of like, not all the experience is relevant, but it is really cool to see like how he presented himself. And, you know, it kind of has all those sections, which is perfectly fine. Does take up space. So it's like, we've talked about it and we're like, well, we could have gotten this to one page, but it, you know, at the end of the day, it's not a make or break. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to highlight with this one. And I'm almost done with examples, but with these last two cover letters, again, it's just showing why you're interested in the role and like what you think is the most relevant piece. And in the resume or the cover letter on the left, it was bringing something that's not in your resume of, you know, your goal could be to be on air and stuff, but if you genuinely love working with people and just like a very people orientated person and like very outgoing, you can tell in cover letters who's the most outgoing people in the world because their cover letters are outgoing and you're like, oh, this is going to be somebody who's going to come in and like make their voice heard. And it's really cool to see. And then last, because we talked about being vulnerable, I did include my resume from when I first started off in my career and now. Huge difference. My involvement, I definitely dragged out different things I was a part of, my volunteer experience, and I milked those for everything because they were the most relevant I had. I just gotten into my internship. Public relations and communications was not the jobs I was going after. So I really wanted to use everything I could. Now that I've had more experience, I just shrunk it to the bottom section of just listing it out because I want to still keep it because it's a big part of like how I developed my career and like relationships I've made. I'm quite proud of like my Big 12 relationships and my NCAA relationships, and I really didn't want to lose that when condensing my resume. And something that was random was the Boston University. I did get my paralegal certificate. And I was talking to somebody in our company and they're like, that is so random. And they were so interested in it because it's like, it's not necessarily relevant, but I still do a lot of stuff with like contest rules and minor stuff that's kind of relevant to it. So it's a fun thing to include because it stands out of it being different. But that's just kind of how the different ways you could break out, and you know, you'll get experience eventually. So don't worry about the experience. Just worry about like thinking, what have you done? And, you know, what makes you you? And that's really the best way to sell yourself. And that's kind of it for examples. And if we're good, we can send it over to Kevan to talk about rules and just that.
Yeah, so as you guys see, this slide is blank because Kirsten knows that I like to talk, and that's what I'm trying to get into. So I'm just going to kind of talk, but I'm also in, of course, the radio business, and we have to adhere to a clock so we get to our commercial breaks on time. So I'm going to keep this very brief and can answer any questions. And of course, any in the chat, I'll try to answer later on as well. But reels, when you're trying to show what you've done, what you're capable of, when I first started doing my own, I again, this is another thing I didn't have much experience with, and I was just trying to highlight myself. Now being a production director and knowing what sounds good, what doesn't sound good, having a lot of sound effects sometimes can distort what you're trying to get across. If it's audio that you're trying to display, like takes from a podcast and or you've been on other people's shows, you get a chance to, even if you get a chance to call into a radio station, like maybe you email them and ask for that audio so that people get a different sense of what you talk about. If you want to be in front of the camera, different examples. One of the resumes that Kirsten added in here, knowing the candidate that was, I've actually watched some of their reels. Now they're a little bit long, I would say. You want to make sure it's concise, but you get enough of you across. But you also want to make sure that when you transition from one video clip to the next, one audio clip to the next, listen back to it a couple times. Listen to those transitions 2 or 3 times. Make sure that it transitions right and it doesn't cut off something, or it doesn't seem like very regimented to transition, and it's has a nice flow to it as well. Just some of those techniques, and especially if you're at Ohio Media School or BeOnAir, one of the schools across all of the different seven or so schools, you're going to learn some of these techniques. But there's also times I've played around in Adobe Audition when I don't have many commercial things to do, and I'm learning things. I'm teaching myself kind of what certain things do, and then I apply them to a commercial, and I realize, why wasn't I doing this before? Because this really helps the partner, the message that they want to get across. When we are creating them on our side on behalf of them, our thing is with them, what's in it for me? And that's what our mantra is as a sales team. We're trying to do, like, what's in it for the partner? How can we best present their message? Because they're trusting us to send their message out to all of our fans, and how big of our fan base it is. Hey, if I can make that commercial sound bigger than it is, that's a big thing. But don't overdo it. Don't overkill with all the sound effects and the music and everything. Make sure it's you, and just like a resume, it's you coming across of what you're capable of and what you're applying for. If they request one, some places don't always request one. I've been able to move on without having to always update it, but I should be updating it, because you never know where other opportunities are going to come from and when you need that ready, and not have to take all this time to redo it when you haven't touched it for a couple years.
Awesome. Right. And were there any questions about reels that we wanted to cover right now?
I think there's one hand or a couple of hands that are up. We'll move through this quickly because we want to get to the final section, which is on the interview, if that's okay, Cal or Kirsten.
Yeah.
Let's maybe get the first question. Devon, would you like to state your question and then give the team a chance to answer?
No, Kevin had answered it. It was something about, the experience. 'Cause, I'm young, 19 years old, so my resume might not be as long as some other people's. So I was just making sure that wouldn't hinder like an opportunity or anything.
It didn't for me, Devin, so it can be done.
I think it's always about thinking about transferable skills also, as really has been stated and restated as we listen, think about what you've done and how it relates to what it is that you want to do. Okay. I'm going to skip over to Zachary because I don't think Zachary's had a chance to ask a question.
Hold on, sorry. Let me get them going.
That's all right.
There we go. All right, Zachary, you should be set.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So My question is, as far as resumes, going back to the resume portion and skill set, I used to work at the Chicago White Sox for roughly 5 years, but I never worked on the media side. But I did have the opportunity to be a box runner for, excuse me, a couple of guys in the broadcast like Steve Stone, Ed Farmer, DJ, and a couple of other guys in their skill set. So whenever I had the opportunity to run for them little errands, I always ask questions and some of their audio guys. Would you say putting that on a resume may help, even though you wasn't in a position as far as doing anything media for those guys? Because I know those names right there are really big in the broadcast, especially Steve Stone. So would you say itself to how would you put it on your resume that you had the opportunity to work beside these guys but never was in audio, if that make any sense?
Yeah, it's something I actually put on my resume a lot is like working with the groups and facilitating with the groups. I think in sports, there's a lot of connectivity between everyone, and it's really just kind of putting it in your resume of like, I worked with this person and you can include names, and that could be like a cover letter of like, I built relationships within the media working with, and you can list names of like assisting or providing information for. It's something that you can definitely include. And I would say maybe cover letter for like specific names, and for resume, kind of that
Got you.
providing information. And
Okay. Because there was a couple of guys from ESPN, I couldn't name their names to save my life, and some guys were Fox. But Ed gave me some advice. He said, just talk to the guys, which I did. They were very helpful. Even when the Yankees came into town, I always spoke with their media team. But I thank you for that advice, because I'm going to do my resume all over and make sure that I put certain details in that will kind of help me out a bit.
Makes for good conversation also. We're coming to the end of the hour, so let's jump in a quick second on the interview, and we can always backtrack, but let me let you go to that part. Thank you.
And Brian or Kelly will cover this kind of interviewing part.
So interviewing, everyone's favorite part, I'm sure. Get a little more exposed and another chance to be vulnerable. First is preparation. Really, can't be stressed enough. Research the company. Who are you going to interview with? Who are you going to interview for? What is the role? What does that company stand for? What are their values? What are their shows? We've had people walk into our studio to interview, and they don't know what shows we broadcast. Just really doing your research and understanding who it is that you are applying to work with. Have some questions prepared, specific questions that you actually want to know the answer to. I think not just questions to have questions because you think it's a good idea to have questions, because then this seminar we said to have questions. That's not helpful. Ask genuine questions that will help you to understand where you fit in. Have a little idea of how you're going to present yourself without reciting your resume. At that point, they've already read your resume, and they've already selected you to come in for this interview. So you should already feel confident. You should already feel like you have been selected. You are definitely in a smaller crowd at that point, and you should prepare that way. You should really just carry yourself with some confidence. You've already been selected. And then have that practice, have your elevator speech or your little blurb about who you are and what got you there, prepared. If your interview is going to be a virtual interview, please make sure that your computer is hooked up, that you've got internet, that you've downloaded any applications that may be necessary to make that connection, whether it's a Teams or a Zoom. do that in advance. The last thing you want as you're preparing for your interview is to be scrambling with watching that clock click down to 1 minute, 0 minutes before the interview. Be prepared. During the interview, dress professionally. You may be the most professionally dressed person in the room. That no points lost for that. You're never going to be looked down upon for being more dressed than those who are interviewing you. Be professional. Be confident. Like we said, you've already been selected to be interviewed. You should definitely be confident in what it is that you've put out there has already been received as something that they want to see more of. Be comfortable, but not too comfortable. No, you shouldn't be slouched in your seat and feet up on the desk. Certainly not that. But as relaxed as you can be, just so that you can really present yourself the most real way. Again, asking questions is great. If they come up while someone is speaking, I would write them down so that you can ask them later. Try not to interrupt. But questions are great. After the interview, always a great idea to follow up with a thank you note, an email, as quickly as possible. Same day is great. Next day is great. Much after that, it kind of gets lost. But just a quick note to thank those who were in the room for their time and the opportunity, and to remind them that you're available for any other questions. If you don't hear back, follow up. You may just be in limbo. They may be interviewing. Those are great questions to ask at the time of the interview. What's the rest of your process look like? What time frame should I expect? Things like that are good to ask during. But if you didn't get that chance, then follow up and ask afterwards. And just understanding their process and being flexible with that. But my greatest advice is to prepare. You can see in these boxes, the biggest list, the strongest list, the most letters are in that preparation, just being ready for that interview.
And then in that question that's always asked is strengths and weaknesses. So I kind of wanted to throw something on here, and Brian will talk about strengths really quick.
There we go. Yeah, so these are just, I don't want to take too much time on this, and I'll kick it to Kirsten rather shortly, but just some ideas as far as when you get that question, because I think it's an easy question, even as somebody who's interviewed a lot of people. When I need a default question, this is probably it. Tell us about one of your strengths. But I think the big piece that I really wanted to point out, and you might have saw it on the last slide, is having anecdotes ready to go with these things. Saying that you're organized or creative or decisive, that sounds great. Tell me how you are. Tell me an example of how you showcase that. Because I may believe you if you tell me that you're one of those things, but I'll really believe you if you tell me a story about how you showcase that skill. So same with the weaknesses, which I know Kirsten will get into. Just because it says weaknesses doesn't mean it's a negative thing. So Kirsten, with that, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, so weaknesses, it's kind of funny because it's the one question that I kind of just quit asking. I always ask for strengths. Weaknesses I ask, but I'm like, it's not the most fun. And there's only so many. There's a ton, but you tend to get the same. And I think with strengths and weaknesses is like, don't say what you think they want to hear. Say like how you are as a person. Like, this is another personality question to show who you are. The one weakness that I keep getting that I was getting was lack of experience. And that was one of my least favorite weaknesses, simply because kind of how we said on the resume, like, you have an experience and it's really just underselling yourself if that's what you believe the weakness is. You have experiences, you have the ability to do well in the role, and you really should believe that. I think kind of reaching into those other areas of like, where you're hard on yourself and like areas you struggle in that you're working to get better, or something that you're like, you're currently working on, I think are all good, weaknesses to rely on, because I think when you go to lack of experience as the weakness, it kind of takes away from the experience you have. And, I just talked all about all my resumes of you have experience no matter what. So, you know, I think showing that with your weakness is another thing. So I just wanted to throw that on there because it's one of the most common asked questions ever. So yeah, we're good.
Not cooperating. Okay. Did that take us to the end? I think that took us to the last slide, didn't it? And 7:30, so a little bit past 7:30. We appreciate your time. We really don't want to keep anybody here longer than that 1 hour time. There was a lot of valuable information to be gained from here. And would it be all right that I share this deck with the people that attended? Is that
Absolutely
all right to do? Yeah, because they're really good notes. And, you know, to me, I think the big takeaway is that we really live in a time that telling our story is so important, and really thinking about who we are and the things that we've done that will move us forward for the job opportunities in front of us. And you've done an exceptional job of really making that easy. And I love the empty slide, Kev, the real slide, because that is who you are. That is just perfect. You know, and these are friends of the campus. You can reach out to them, connect with them on LinkedIn. And also, you know, please reach out to your career service directors as you're working through these things, because sometimes the answers are really right in front of you. They're not as difficult as they may seem. So with that, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you here, Brian and Kirsten and Kevin and Kelly. We've got a lot of K's here. Tony joined us too to help us along, but you did such a masterful job that you really didn't need either of us. We invite everybody to check back in, and let's keep growing and going so we land those jobs that we're looking to land. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you.
Pleasure, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
guys for sitting
Have a
in.
great night.
Great job.
Good night, everybody.